In section 3.7, we're going to look at solving percent problems. These can be a little confusing at times, but if you take a systematic approach, that will help. So first of all, what is percent? Well, think about how many cents are in a dollar. There are 100 cents in a dollar. There are 100 years in a century. So percent means per 100. So as an example, 57% means 57 out of 100, or 57 per 100. And we can use that to help solve these problems. So we can set up a proportion here, which we've worked with. Look for key words such as, of course, percent, but then also is and of. And generally speaking, you might be able to find some exceptions, but generally speaking, we can look at it in this way. The percent will be written over 100, and that will equal that ratio of is to of. So let's see an example here shortly. Another way that you can look at this is that percent over 100 and the ratio is over of both represent the ratio of part to whole. And we can also talk about part to whole as part of the base over the base. So depending on who you talk to, you'll see a few different terms used here. So here's an example. What percent of 50 is 20? So we're looking for the percent, so our variable goes over 100 and then equals, the is goes in the numerator, 20, and of goes in the denominator. And then we can cross multiply if we want, and remember we only want to do that when there's an equal sign between the two ratios. So if we cross multiply, we get x times 50, or in other words 50x equals 100 times 20 is 2,000. Divide each side by 50 to solve for x. X equals 40. And then that's already as a percent, so 20 is 40% of 50. And then in another approach that you'll sometimes see, the word is often means equals. That's where our equal sign will go. And the word of will tell us to multiply. So if we looked at the same problem before, what percent of 50 is 20? We're multiplying the what percent, in other words the x, times 50. So 50x, and then is where our equal sign will go, so we have equals 20. And this time we solve by dividing by 50, so x equals 20 over 50, which simplifies to 2 over 5. And then because we're working with percentages, we can go ahead and convert that to a decimal. And if you take 2 divided by 5, you'll get 0.4 or 0.40. And then remember, to convert a decimal to a percent, we have to move the decimal point 2 to the right, and we end up with 40%, just like we did in the first case. We have something called the percent equation, which is similar to this concept above, where we say A is equal to P percent times B. And that will match up with a statement like this: A is P percent of B. So let's look at some examples. First of all, just some terms. Identify the percent, the base, and the part of the base in the following statement. 36 is 30% of 120. So the percent, in this case, appears right next to our percent sign. Imagine that. So it's 30. The base is what we're taking it out of or comparing to. So of 120 tells us that the base is 120. And then the part of the base is attached to the word is. 36 is. So 36 is the part of the base here. Okay, number 2, and here with the directions specifically tell us use a proportion to answer the question. So what percent of 80 is 16? So what percent means x will go over 100, and that is equal to, of 80 means 80 goes in the denominator, is 16, 16 goes in the numerator. Now we can go ahead and cross multiply right away if you want to, and we're going to get 80x equal to 100 times 16 will give us 1600, and then divide each side by 80, and we get x equals 20. Another thing we could have done is you might have noticed, let me rewrite this, I'll put it in a different color here, so we have x over 100 is equal to 16 over 80. You might notice that this can be simplified, and as a matter of fact, 16 goes into 80 5 times. 16 goes into 16 once, and here you get a much simpler problem then. 5x, when you cross multiply, 5x is equal to 100 times 1, and then divide by 5, and you still get the same result, x equals 20. Therefore, 16 is 20% of 80. Okay, very similar problem here in terms of the setup. What percent, so we know we're going to have x over 100, of 40, so 40 goes in the denominator, is 60. So 60 is the part. Now notice in this case, the part of the base is actually bigger than the base. That's okay. That's not a problem. Sometimes that's a good thing. All that means is that we're going to end up with a percentage that's over 100%. Now we might want to simplify this, so I'm going to use this symbol to show which leads to. So x over 100 equals 60 over 40. That leads to x over 100 is equal to, we can divide each of these by 20 to get 3 over 2. And then we can cross multiply. And we get 2x equals 300. Divide each side by 2 to get 150. So remember, that's our percent. So we have 150%. In other words, 60 is 150% of 40, which makes sense. It's more than 40, so it's more than 100%. Okay, what number is 14% of 120? So we have our percent, so 14 will go over 100. And then is the part we're looking for, so that goes in the numerator of 120. 120 is the base. That goes in the denominator. Again, we can simplify here if you would like. We can divide each of those by 2 at least. That will help a little bit. So this would be 7 over 50. And then if we cross multiply, we have 7 times 120 will give us 840. And that's going to be equal to 50 times x, or in other words, 50x. Then we're going to divide each side by 50, and we're going to get 16.8 is equal to x. So 16.8 is 14% of 120, and this makes sense. It's always good to check if your numbers seem reasonable. 14% is a little more than 10%, and 10% of 120 is easy to calculate. Just move the decimal one place over. That's 12. Well, because 14% is more than 10%, our answer better be a little more than 12. 16.8 is a little more than 12, so this seems like a reasonable answer. Even if it's not exactly correct, at least it's in the ballpark. Hey, 48 is what percent of 128? So we're looking for the percent. X goes on top over 100. And 48 is the part of the base. 128 is the base of 128. So 128 goes in the denominator. So we can go ahead, we can simplify this. I'm just going to go ahead and cross multiply. We get 128x is equal to 4,800. And then divide each side by 128. And I'll be sneaky and bring in a calculator here. So we'll take 4,800 divided by 128, and we get 37.5. So x is equal to 37.5. And remember that that's a percent. So 37.5%. Hey, number 6, and this will apply to 7 also. Use the percent equation to answer the question. And remember, the percent equation was written as A equals P percent times B. Okay, so we have what percent of 115 is 37. So we're going to have 37 equals, so is where our equals will go, and then what percent, so we could say P or X, whichever one you want. So let's, in this case, say X percent times our base of 115. And so we're going to divide by 115. So divide each side by 115, 37 over 115, over 115. And again, we can use the handy dandy calculator, and we get 37 divided by 115 is equal to, and I'm going to round this at 0.322. So we look at the 1 in the thousandth place, and to the right of it we have 5 or higher, so I'm going to round that up to 2. So 0.322. So 0.322 equals X percent. But remember that really this is our decimal answer that we need to convert to a percent. And so in this method we have to move our decimal place 2 to the right to say that X is equal to 32.2%. Okay, and 32.2% is just a little less than a third. Does it make sense? Is 37 a little less than a third of 115? Well, that makes sense, because if you take 3 times 37, that would give you, what, 90 plus 21, so 111, which is just a little less than 115. So our answer is reasonable. Okay, what number is 62% of 194? And so we're looking for what number, so X is, and then 62%, we need to convert that to a decimal before we multiply. So we get 0.62 times 194. So again, I'll grab the calculator here and take 0.62 times 194, and that equals 120.28. So X equals 120.28. All right, and number 8. In a survey of 55 students, 23 responded that they would go see a movie during the next weekend. What percent of those surveyed said that they will go see a movie? Round to the nearest tenth of a percent if necessary. So we had 55 students, that's our base. We're trying to find a percent. So we're looking for X percent, so X out of 100 is equal to the whole, or the base is 55, because we're talking about of 55, and the number that responded was 23. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply, cross multiply here, and get 55x is equal to 2300. Okay, and then I'm going to divide each side by 55. So 2300 divided by 55 is equal to 41.8, and then it continues on, but we were asked to round to the nearest tenth of a percent. Remember that using a proportion over where the percent is over 100, our answer is already a percent here, so we don't move the decimal. So the 8 is in the tenths place. We look to the right, and it's a 1, so we keep the 8, and we call it 41.8%. Okay, so X equals 41.8%. So there you go with solving percent problems. Remember, please, to take a systematic approach to these so you don't get quite so confused. Good luck.